The elementary school echoed with kids' laughter and squeaking sneakers, but in the principal's office, Rick Malone ruled like a tyrant. 50, wiry, silver hair slicked back, he'd strut the halls, barking orders, making teachers flinch. Then there's Sarah Brooks, 34, soft-spoken, blonde hair in a loose ponytail, her hands rough from scrubbing desks after hours. She was the aide who kept the classroom humming, until Rick lost it. One crisp fall day, he caught her lingering late, sorting crayons, and when she asked for extra supplies for the poorer kids, he exploded. "You're not saving the world." He fired her on the spot, voice booming down the hall, shredding her request in front of stunned staff. He didn't know she'd been dipping into her own paycheck to buy pencils and notebooks for kids who had nothing, or that she tutored stragglers after dark, expecting no thanks. Didn't know those quiet acts would flip his world. Years later, Sarah's kindness, unseen, unsung, put her in charge and Rick's throne crumbled. They messed with the wrong one. Smash that like if you'd fight back too, subscribe to see justice drop, and comment your city. Let's see where this story's hitting. The alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m., a cheap plastic thing on a chipped nightstand in Sarah Brooks' one-bedroom apartment. She rolled out of bed, feet hitting the cold linoleum, her breath fogging in the early October chill. 34, blonde hair fraying at the ends, she tied it back with a stretched-out scrunchie, her face still soft but etched with lines from years of squinting at budgets. Her sneakers, once white, now gray with scuff marks, squeaked as she grabbed her faded canvas bag, the strap patched with duct tape. She lived 3 blocks from Jefferson Elementary, a squat brick building in a working-class slice of Cleveland, where the air smelled of diesel and wet leaves. Sarah wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't need to be. She'd been an aide there for 6 years, the kind of woman who'd kneel to tie a kid's shoe without a word, her hands steady even when the chaos of 32nd graders erupted around her. She loved the small joys. The way little Jamal's eyes lit up when he nailed a spelling word, or how Maria's gap-toothed grin flashed over a shared apple slice at lunch. Her paycheck barely covered rent, but she'd slip an extra sandwich into her bag some days, splitting it with kids whose moms worked doubles and couldn't pack much. Her mornings started early, walking past sagging porches and chain-link fences, the school looming ahead with its flickering welcome sign. Inside, the halls hummed, lockers clanged, kids shouted, the PA crackled with announcements. The classroom she worked in smelled of chalk dust and glue sticks, the walls plastered with crayon drawings and wobbly handwriting. She'd shuffle between desks, her voice low but firm. "Try that B again, sweetie. It's got a belly." She wasn't a teacher, not officially, but she'd linger after hours, helping the slow ones with phonics or math, her pencil scratching alongside theirs under the dim fluorescent buzz. Then there was Rick Malone, principal of Jefferson Elementary, a man who walked like he was auditioning for a dictator flick. 50, wiry as a coat hanger, with silver hair slicked back and a tie always too tight, he'd storm through the halls, his dress shoes clicking like gunfire. His office was a shrine to himself, plaques from budget cuts he'd heroically enforced, a photo of him shaking hands with some city council nobody. He'd bellow over the intercom, "Tardy slips are due by noon," or corner teachers in the lounge, sneering, "You're not here to coddle them." Rick thrived on control, on making people jump. His voice could turn a quiet hallway into a flinch fest. Sarah had seen it up close. Once he'd chewed out Ms. Torres, a third-grade teacher, for letting a kid borrow a book overnight. "This isn't a library." His face red, veins popping. Another time, he'd yanked a janitor's mop mid-shift, barking, "Faster or you're out." The staff called him the bulldog behind his back, half out of fear, half out of spite. He didn't care about the kids. Not really just the test scores, the funding, the optics. Jefferson was his kingdom, and he ruled it with a snarl. Sarah mostly stayed out of his way. She wasn't one for confrontations. Her strength was quieter, in the way she'd slip a Band-Aid onto a scraped knee or hum a tune to calm a crying 6-year-old. But she had a spine. You could see it in how she'd square her shoulders when Rick's shadow loomed too close. She'd heard the rumors, how he'd slashed art supplies to balance the books, how he'd fired a custodian last year for clocking in 5 minutes late. She kept her head down, but her eyes caught everything. There was one kid, though, who'd wormed his way into her orbit. Eddie Grayson, a scrawny 7-year-old with a mop of brown curls and a stutter that made him shrink in class. His mom worked nights at a diner his dad long gone, and his backpack was a trash bag half the time. Sarah noticed him early. How he'd linger at recess, kicking pebbles, too shy to join the kickball games. One day, she'd found him hunched over a torn worksheet, pencil trembling, and sat beside him without a word. "Let's do it together," she'd said, her voice like a warm blanket. She didn't tell anyone, didn't need to. She just kept at it, day after day, slipping him extra crayons or a granola bar when his stomach growled. She never expected anyone to see it. Not Eddie's mom, not the other teachers, not even Eddie himself. She did it because it was right, because someone had to. She'd walk home after dark, her bag lighter but her chest heavy, knowing half her grocery money went to those kids. She'd sit on her sagging couch, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, the radio crackling oldies in the background. It was her rhythm, worn shoes, small joys, quiet fights. But trouble was brewing. It started small, like a spark in dry grass. One Tuesday, Rick caught her in the hall, arms full of construction, paper she'd bought herself. "What's this?" he'd snapped, snatching a sheet. "Trying to play hero again?" She kept her mouth shut, but her jaw tightened, a flicker he didn't miss. "Stick to your job, Brooks," he'd growled, tossing the paper back at her, some sheets fluttering to the floor. She'd knelt to pick them up, her fingers steady, but inside, something shifted. Not anger, not yet, just a slow, simmering resolve. The next day, she overheard him in the lounge, bragging to a teacher about trimming the fat, his code for cutting hours or jobs. His laugh was sharp like broken glass, and it stuck in her ears as she scrubbed glue off a desk later. She didn't know it then. But that moment was the first thread unraveling, a jab, a slip, a hint of the storm coming. Rick thought he had her pegged. Quiet, expendable, a pushover. He couldn't have been more wrong. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in Jefferson Elementary's second-grade classroom, casting a sterile glow over chipped desks and a fraying alphabet rug. It was a Thursday, mid-November, the air outside thick, with the threat of snow. Sarah Brooks moved between the kids, her sneakers whispering on the linoleum, a stack of worksheets in her hands. She'd stayed up late the night before, cutting out turkey shapes from construction, papers she'd bought with her last $20, something fun for the kids before Thanksgiving break. Her eyes were heavy, but she smiled anyway, handing one to little Maria, who beamed back. "Thanks, Miss Sarah." The room was a controlled chaos. Pencils scratched, chairs creaked. A kid in the back sneezed loud enough to make the others giggle. Sarah loved it, the mess and the noise, the way it felt live. She just knelt to help Jamal with his spelling. "Cat has a T at the end, see?" When the door slammed open. The sound ricocheted like a gunshot, and every head snapped up. Richard Rick Malone filled the doorway, his tie crooked, face twisted in a scowl. "Brooks," he barked, his voice slicing through the chatter. Sarah stood, brushing chalk, dust off her jeans, her heart thudding but her face calm. "Yes, sir," she said, keeping it steady. He stormed in, dress shoes clicking, holding a crumpled memo she'd left on his desk, a polite request for more art supplies, typed on the ancient staff computer. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, shaking it like it was evidence in a trial. The kids went silent, eyes wide, some sinking lower in their seats. Sarah took a breath, stepping forward to shield them from his glare. "It's just a suggestion, Mr. Malone. The kids could use." "I don't give a damn what they could use." He cut her off, his voice rising, spit flecking the air. "You think you run this place? Handing out paper like it grows on trees?" He tore the memo in half, then quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. Sarah's throat tightened, but she didn't flinch, not yet. "I was just trying to help," she said low, almost a whisper. "Help." Rick laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're a glorified babysitter, Brooks. Stick to wiping noses and leave the decisions to me." He turned to the class, pointing a finger. "Anyone else got a hero complex?" No one moved. Sarah felt the heat creep up her neck, the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on her back. Then it got worse. He spotted the turkey cutouts on the desks, snatched one up, and held it like it was trash. "What's this crap? You wasting time on crafts while I'm drowning in budget cuts. He crumpled it, tossing it at her feet. You're done here. Pack your shit and get out now. The words landed like a punch, raw and final. Sarah's hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists, hiding it. Mr. Malone, Out, he roared, loud enough to make little Eddie Grayson flinch in the corner, his pencil dropping. Sarah froze, the air thick with humiliation. Rick smirked, arms crossed, thinking he'd won. Don't make me call security, he added, voice dripping with venom. She didn't argue. Not because she couldn't, but because the kids were watching, their faces pale, some blinking back tears. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a scene. She grabbed her bag from a hook, the patched strap, digging into her shoulder, and walked out, head high but chest hollow. The hall echoed with her steps, Rick's laugh chasing her like a ghost. The door clicked shut, and she heard him mutter, "Good riddance," through the wood. Outside, the wind bit at her cheeks, snowflakes swirling in the gray dusk. She leaned against the brick wall, breath fogging, her hands shaking now that no one could see. She'd lost more than a job, rent was due in a week, and she'd already spent her buffer on those damn supplies. Her mind flashed to her apartment. The leaky faucet, the stack of bills, the half-empty fridge. She'd been planning to bake cookies with the kids. Next week, a little treat from her own pantry. Now, nothing. She slid down the wall, sitting on the cold pavement, her bag beside her. The sting wasn't just the money, it was the kids. Jamal's shy grin, Maria's laugh, Eddie's quiet thanks when she'd slipped him a snack. She'd fought for them, not for glory, and Rick had crushed it like it was nothing. Her throat burned, a lump she couldn't swallow, but she wouldn't cry. Not here, not for him. Rick, meanwhile, swaggered back to his office, tossing the torn memo in the trash. He leaned back in his leather chair, secondhand, but he'd brag about it anyway, propping his feet on the desk. One less bleeding heart, he muttered, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign peeling off his door. He thought he dodged a bullet, kept his budget tight, his control intact. He didn't know Sarah's kindness ran deeper than he could fathom, or that it had come back to haunt him. That night, Sarah walked home, the snow sticking to her hair, her sneakers soaked. She stopped at the corner store, picking up a dented can of soup with her last few bucks. The cashier, an older guy named Hank, gave her a nod. "Rough day?" he asked, voice gruff but kind. She shrugged, forcing a smile. "Yeah, lost my job." Hank slid a candy bar across the counter, free. "For the road," he said. She took it, the small gesture cracking something in her chest. Back at her place, she sat on the couch, soup simmering on the stove, the radio humming low. She unwrapped the candy bar, breaking it in half, habit from sharing with the kids. Then she stopped, staring at it, her breath hitching. She wasn't done, not with them, not with herself. She didn't know how, but she'd fight back. Not for revenge, Sarah didn't work that way, but for the ones who couldn't. Across town, Eddie Grayson sat at his rickety kitchen table, his mom asleep on the couch after her shift. He pulled a crumpled drawing from his bag, a turkey he'd hidden from Rick's tantrum. For Miss Sarah, he'd scrawled on it, the letters shaky. He didn't know she'd been fired, but he'd seen her that day, standing tall when Rick yelled. He tucked it away, hoping she'd come back. Sarah didn't sleep much that night. The wind rattled her windows, and she lay there, fists clenched under the blanket. She'd lost everything, her job, her routine, her little world, but not her spine. Rick thought he'd broken her, sent her packing like trash. He didn't see the fire kindling, the vow forming in her silence. She was done bending. Not for him, not ever again. Snow piled up outside Sarah Brooks' apartment, the kind of heavy, wet slush that turned Cleveland's streets into a gray mess. It had been 3 weeks since Rick Malone fired her, and the days blurred into a grind, job applications, instant noodles, and the hum of a space heater that barely worked. Sarah, 34, sat at her wobbly kitchen table, her blonde hair loose, fraying sweater bunched at the elbows. Her laptop glowed, a rejection email from a daycare job staring back. "We appreciate your interest," but she shut it with a sigh, rubbing her eyes. Rent was overdue, and her bank account was down to $47.12. Still, She hadn't stopped moving. Mornings, she'd walk past Jefferson Elementary, not close enough to be seen, but near enough to hear the kids' voices spilling out at recess. It hurt, like a bruise you keep pressing, but it kept her sharp. She'd started volunteering at a community center 2 blocks away, teaching basic reading to kids after school. It wasn't paid, but it was something those small faces, eager or shy, reminded her why she'd fought for her job in the first place. She'd slipped them pencils from her own stash, leftovers from her classroom days, and never mentioned it to anyone. One afternoon, sorting books at the center, she found a clue. A parent, Mrs. Grayson, Eddie's mom, dropped off a flyer for a school board meeting. "You should go," she said, her voice tired but firm, eyes flicking to Sarah's patch bag. "They're talking budgets, and Malone's pushing cuts again." Sarah nodded, tucking the flyer away, her pulse quickening. It wasn't much, but it was a thread, something to pull. She'd heard whispers before she got fired. Rick fudging. Numbers, redirecting supply, funds to consulting fees nobody could trace. If she could find proof, maybe she could expose him. Not for herself, but for the kids losing their crayons and books. That night, she dug through her closet, pulling out a shoebox of old papers, lesson plans, receipts, notes from her time at Jefferson. Buried at the bottom was a crumpled email printout from last spring, Rick to the staff. "Supply budgets frozen, deal with it." But Sarah remembered delivering boxes of paper to his office weeks later, marked approved purchase. Where'd the money come from? She smoothed the page, her hands steady despite the cold seeping through her walls. It was a start. Meanwhile, Rick was tightening his chokehold at school. He'd slashed the art program to 1 day a month, blaming district mandates, and started docking teachers hours for minor infractions. 5 minutes late, a sick day, without a doctor's note. In the lounge, he'd gloat over coffee, his voice carrying, "Run a tight ship, you get results." Teachers nodded, heads down, afraid of his temper. He'd hired a new aide, some nervous college kid who'd work cheap and keep quiet, thinking Sarah's absence had sealed his control. But the kids felt it. Classrooms were colder, desks emptier of supplies, and little Eddie Grayson stopped raising his hand, his drawings tucked away, unsaid. Rick didn't notice the cracks forming. Parents grumbled at pickup, whispering about missing books or canceled field trips. The school board meeting loomed, and while Rick prepped his usual charm offensive charts, smiles, bullshit, Sarah was moving in the shadows. She started asking questions at the community center, low-key to parents and volunteers. One dad, a mechanic named Luis, mentioned seeing Rick with a slick guy in a suit last year, handing over an envelope in the parking lot. "Looked shady," Luis said, shrugging. Sarah filed it away, her mind turning. Her kindness, though, never paused. At the center, she'd sit with kids like Tasha, a 3rd grader who struggled with words, sounding out dog until her face lit up. Sarah didn't know Tasha's mom was a school board clerk quietly watching her patients, or that Eddie's mom had started telling neighbors about that nice lady who got fired. Sarah wasn't chasing clout, she never had. When she slipped Tasha an extra eraser or stayed late to lock up, it was just who she was. But those acts were seeds, sprouting in ways she couldn't see. The stakes climbed higher. Sarah's landlord left a note under her door. Pay up by month's end or she'd be out. She pawned her mom's old necklace, silver, nothing fancy, for $80, enough to keep the lights on. Nights, she'd lie awake, the radiator clanking, thinking of the kids. Jamal's spelling was slipping without her. Maria's mom had mentioned it at the center. If Rick's cuts went through, more aides would go, more kids left behind. She couldn't let that happen. Then came a spark, an ally. At the center, she ran into Ms. Torres, the 3rd grade teacher Rick had humiliated months back. Over lukewarm coffee in a styrofoam cup, Torres leaned in, voice low. "I know what he's doing," she said. "He's skimming, supply funds, grants. I saw a receipt once, didn't add up." Sarah's breath caught. "You have it." Torres shook her head. "He's careful. But check the board's records, public ones. Might be something." It was risky. Digging into Rick's dirt meant poking a bear, but Sarah felt the shift like a door cracking open. Rick, oblivious, upped the ante. He announced a performance review for all staff, a thinly veiled threat to fire anyone who crossed him. In his office, he taped up a new plaque, some nonsense about leadership excellence, and smirked at his reflection. He thought Sarah was gone, forgotten, another nobody he'd crushed, but she was out there, walking dark streets to the library, pulling public budget reports on a creaky computer. Her hands shook, not from fear, but purpose. Her kindness kept weaving through it. One evening, she found Eddie at the center, alone, waiting for his mom. He clutched a crumpled note. Miss Sarah, I miss you. She hugged him, quick and quiet, slipping him a pencil she'd sharpened that morning. You're doing great, kiddo, she whispered. She didn't know his mom was outside, watching through the window, tears in her eyes. The tension coiled tighter. Sarah printed out a report, line items for miscellaneous expenses that didn't match the school's needs. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to take to the board meeting. She'd have to face Rick, his sneer, his lies. If she failed, she'd lose more than a job, her apartment, her fight, her place in this town. But if she won, the kids might get their crayons back. She spent her last $5 on a bus ticket to the board office, folding the reports into her bag. The library clock ticked past midnight, her reflection pale in the monitor's glow. She wasn't ready, not fully, but she was done waiting. Rick thought he buried her. He didn't see her rising, step by quiet step, ready to roll the dice. The school board meeting was set for 7 p.m., a gray Tuesday in December, the kind of night where Cleveland's streetlights flickered through a haze of snow flurries. Sarah Brooks stood outside the district office, a squat concrete box downtown, her breath puffing in the cold. Her patched canvas bag hung heavy on her shoulder, stuffed with budget reports and that crumpled email from Rick, her makeshift arsenal. She'd spent the last of her cash on the bus ride, her sneakers soaked from trudging through slush, her hands chapped red. 34, blonde hair tucked under a thrift store beanie, she looked small against the building's bulk, but her eyes burned steady. Inside, the meeting room smelled of stale coffee and damp coats, fluorescent lights buzzing over rows of folding chairs. Parents and teachers filled half the seats, their murmurs low, faces tired. Rick Malone sat up front with the board, his tie crisp, silver hair gleaming under the lights. He flashed a politician's smile, shaking hands, his voice smooth as he pitched his latest cuts. Efficiency, folks, keeps us in the black. Sarah slipped in late, taking a seat in the back, her heart hammering. She clutched her bag like a lifeline. She'd planned it out. Wait for public comments, stand up, present the numbers. The miscellaneous expenses didn't match the school supply logs. She cross-checked them at the library, her pencil scratching late into the night. It wasn't ironclad, but it was enough to raise questions, maybe spark an audit. She'd rehearsed her words in the mirror. Calm, clear, no venom. This wasn't about her. It was about the kids. But then it unraveled. Rick's new aide, the nervous college kid, spotted her from the front. He whispered something to Rick, who turned, his eyes locking on her like a hawk. The smile didn't fade, it sharpened. When the board chair called for comments, Rick stood first, cutting her off. Before we hear from the public, he said, voice dripping with control, I'd like to address a personnel matter. He held up a file, Sarah's termination papers, waved like a trophy. We recently let go an aide for insubordination. Seems she's here to stir trouble. The room shifted, heads turning, whispers rising. Sarah's stomach dropped, her palms slick. That's not true, she said, standing, her voice shaking but loud enough. I have evidence, Rick cut in laughing. Evidence? From a fired babysitter? Sit down, Miss Brooks. You're embarrassing yourself. The chair, a balding guy in a cheap suit, banged his gavel. Order. Ms. Brooks, you'll wait your turn, if we get to it. Her turn never came. Rick steamrolled the meeting, piling on charm and jargon, fiscal responsibility, streamlined resources, until the board nodded like puppets. Parents tried to speak, but he drowned them out, his voice booming over objections. Sarah's papers stayed in her bag, her chance slipping. When the gavel fell, cuts approved, meeting adjourned. She sat there, numb, as people shuffled out. Rick shot her a smirk on his way past, muttering, "Better luck next time." She stumbled into the night, the snow heavier now, sticking to her lashes. The bus was gone. She'd missed it, so she walked 3 miles back to her apartment, the wind slicing through her thin coat. Her shoes squished, her bag sagged, wet papers crinkling inside. She'd failed. No audit, no questions, just Rick's victory lap. The kids would lose more, Art Aide's hope, and she couldn't stop it. Her landlord's eviction notice flashed in her mind. She'd be out by Christmas if she didn't scrape up cash. At home, she slumped against the door, the apartment dark, the heater silent, power cut, bill unpaid. She slid to the floor, knees to her chest, her breath hitching. The room smelled of mildew and defeat, the radio dead on the counter. Was it all for nothing? She whispered, her voice cracking. She saw their faces, Jamal, Maria, Eddie, fading behind Rick's sneer. Her fists balled, nails digging into her palms, but the fight drained out, leaving her hollow. She'd rolled the dice and lost everything. Her shot, her home, her purpose. She stayed there minutes or hours, the cold seeping into her bones. Her bag tipped over, papers spilling, a soggy mess of numbers and hope. She stared at them, eyes blurring, until one caught the streetlights glow through the window. Eddie's turkey drawing, smudged but intact, for Miss Sarah scrawled in crayon. She picked it up, trembling, and something broke loose. Not tears, memories. Eddie's shy grin when she'd helped him spell bird, the way he'd clutched that pencil she'd given him. Tasha's laugh at the center, cracking dog, after an hour of trying. The granola bars, the crayons, the late nights. She hadn't done it for applause, but for them. Her breath slowed, steadying. She wasn't a hero, never had been, just a woman who cared too much to quit. Rick thought he'd won, buried her in his petty kingdom. But those kids, they were her why. She couldn't save the school tonight, but she hadn't lost them. Not yet. She stood, legs shaky, and lit a candle from a drawer, its flicker weak, but alive. The drawing went on the table, a quiet anchor. Across town, Rick celebrated in his office, feet up, a cheap whiskey in hand. Told you she'd flop, he chuckled to the empty room, the new plaque glinting on his wall. He didn't know Mrs. Grayson had slipped out of the meeting early, furious, texting other parents. "We need to fight this." Didn't know Tasha's mom, the board clerk, had kept Sarah's soggy flyer, her handwriting neat despite the rain. Didn't know Sarah's kindness had roots he couldn't touch. Sarah didn't sleep. She sat by the candle, her silhouette sharp against the wall, replaying the meeting. Rick's smirk, the gavel's thud, it stung, but it didn't break her. She thought of Ms. Torres' tip, public records, receipts. There was more out there, buried deeper. She'd find it. Not tonight, not with nothing left, but soon. Her jaw set, eyes clear in the dim light. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next morning, she walked to the community center, snow crunching underfoot, her bag lighter, but her step sure. She'd tutor Tasha, check on Eddie, keep going. Rick thought he'd crushed her, sent her running. He didn't see her coming back, quiet as ever, ready to step into the ring. No turning back now. The community center smelled of burnt coffee and damp coats, a low hum of voices filling the cramped room on a frigid January evening. Sarah Brooks stood near the back, her patch bag slung over her shoulder, blonde hair tucked under her beanie. She'd been coming here daily since the board meeting flop, tutoring kids, sorting donations, keeping her head above water. Her apartment was gone. She'd moved into a friend's spare room, sleeping on a lumpy futon, her few belongings in a cardboard box. 34, thinner now, her hands rougher. But her eyes still held that quiet fire. She'd kept digging. Nights at the library, hunched over public records, her pencil scratching through budget lines. Ms. Torres' tip had panned out. Discrepancies in Rick's miscellaneous expenses led to a trail. Invoices for supplies that never reached Jefferson, payments to a shell company called EDU Consult. Sarah cross-checked dates, her breath fogging the screen, until she found it. A $10,000 consulting fee, approved by Rick the same month he'd frozen staff supplies. She'd photocopied it all, her hands steady, building a case she didn't even know how to use. Then came the ally, Mrs. Grayson, Eddie's mom. hadn't let the board meeting slide. She'd rallied parents, her diner shift exhaustion fueling late-night calls. That Malone's a crook, she'd told Sarah over coffee at the center, sliding her a USB drive. Found this in Eddie's old backpack, recordings from her class. Sarah frowned, plugging it into the center's ancient PC. Tinny audio crackled. Rick's voice mid-rant, "Budgets don't grow on trees, Brooks." Then quieter to someone on the phone, "Yeah, move the funds, they won't notice." It was gold, proof he'd siphoned money, caught by a kid's forgotten recorder. Sarah didn't hesitate. She called Ms. Torres, who linked her to Tasha's mom, the board clerk. They met in secret, 3 women in a diner booth, snow pelting the windows, piecing it together. The clerk knew the system. She'd get it to the right ears. No promises, she warned, but her eyes said otherwise. Sarah handed over the drive and papers, her voice calm. "It's not about me. It's for them." She meant the kids, Jamal, Maria, Eddie, and they knew it. The twist landed a week later at an emergency board meeting. Rick strutted in, expecting another rubber stamp session, his tie crisp, smirk ready. The room was packed, parents, teachers, even the local paper stringer in the back. He launched into his spiel, tough choices, strong leadership, when a chair, that balding suit, cut him off. "We've received new evidence, Mr. Malone." Rick's smile froze as Tasha's mom stood, her voice sharp, reading from Sarah's files. 10,000 unaccounted for, diverted to EDU Consult, a company registered to your cousin. The room erupted, gasps, shouts, chairs scraping. Rick stammered, "That's preposterous," but his face drained pale, sweat beading on his brow. The chair held up the USB, playing the recording, Rick's own words, smug and damning. "Move the funds, they won't notice." Parents booed, teachers glared. The stringer scribbled furiously. Sarah slipped in late, standing by the door, her breath shallow. She hadn't planned to speak, but Mrs. Grayson nudged her forward, whispering, "You earned this." She stepped up, her sneakers squeaking, voice soft but cutting through the chaos. "I didn't want this fight," she said, eyes on Rick. "I just wanted the kids to have what they need." She paused, steady. "You took that from them." Rick's mouth opened, but nothing came out, just a choked sputter. The board chair banged his gavel. "Mr. Malone, you're suspended, pending investigation. We'll vote on a replacement tonight." Then came the kindness tie-in. Ms. Torres stood, her voice trembling but firm. "Sarah Brooks isn't just some aide. She bought supplies when you wouldn't, pencils, paper, food for kids who were hungry. I saw it. We all did." Mrs. Grayson nodded, holding up Eddie's drawing. "She helped my boy when no one else cared, taught him, fed him, never asked for a thing." Tasha's mom added, "She tutored my girl free after you fired her. That's who she is." The room shifted, not just anger at Rick, but awe at Sarah. Parents murmured, heads nodding, a slow clap starting in the back. Sarah's throat tightened, her hands clenching her bag. She hadn't meant for this, didn't want the spotlight, but it was out now, her quiet, good-laid bear. Rick slumped in his chair, his plaque mocking him from the wall, his empire cracking. The board deliberated fast, 20 minutes behind closed doors. When they returned, the chair cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Sarah Brooks is interim principal. We'll audit the budget, restore the cuts. Cheers broke out loud and raw. Kids in the crowd jumping. Sarah froze, her breath catching, as Ms. Torres hugged her, whispering, "You did it?" Rick staggered up, face ashen, shoving past chairs. "This is a joke," he snapped, but his voice was hollow, drowned by the crowd. Sarah met his glare, not with triumph, just a look, calm and sure, that said everything. He'd underestimated her, thought her kindness was weakness. Now she held the keys. She didn't gloat. As the room buzzed, she slipped to the back, pulling Eddie's drawing from her bag. Her fingers traced the crayon lines, a small smile breaking through. She'd fought for them, Jamal spelling Maria's art, Eddie's voice in one. Not for revenge, but for right. The power shift settled, quiet but seismic. Rick was out, scrambling. Sarah was in, standing tall. Outside, snow fell soft, blanketing the city. Sarah stepped into it, her beanie damp, her bag light. She didn't know what came next. Principal was a leap, Not a step, but she'd figure it out. Rick's reign was over, his smug throne toppled by a woman he'd called a nobody. The kids had their school back, and she had her moment. Not loud, not flashy, just hers. The fluorescent lights in Jefferson Elementary's main office flickered, casting long shadows over the linoleum as Sarah Brooks stood behind the principal's desk for the first time. It was late January, a week after the board meeting bombshell, and the air still buzzed with change. 34. Her blonde hair loose for once. She wore a second-hand blazer that didn't quite fit, borrowed from Ms. Torres, but her shoulders were square, her hands steady on a stack of budget files. The plaque reading Richard Malone Leadership Excellence lay face down in the trash, replaced by a kid's drawing taped to the wall. Eddie's turkey, smudged but proud. Rick Malone was gone, but not quiet. He'd stormed out of the meeting, coat flapping, yelling about slander and setups as parents jeered. Now he paced his cramped apartment across town, a one-bedroom dump with peeling wallpaper and a sink full of takeout boxes. 50, his silver hair mussed, tie discarded, he gripped a cheap burner phone, barking at anyone who'd listen. "I'll sue," he snapped to his cousin, the EDU Consult frontman, his voice hoarse from whiskey and rage. "They can't prove shit." But his hands shook, sweat beading on his forehead, the bravado hollow. The recording, his own damn words, played on loop in his head. "Move the funds, they won't notice." The school felt his absence like a lifted weight. Teachers lingered in the lounge, voices lighter, swapping stories over coffee instead of ducking Rick's wrath. Miss Torres brought in a box of pencils, real ones, not stubs, and grinned at Sarah across the hall. "First day, huh?" she said, her eyes warm. Sarah nodded, managing a small smile. "Feels weird." Weird didn't cover it. She'd gone from aide to interim principal overnight, a leap that left her dizzy. But she didn't flinch. She'd spent the week digging into Rick's mess, canceled orders, padded invoices, a budget bled dry. Her desk was a war zone of papers, her pencil worn to a nub, but she was fixing it line by line. Rick tried to claw back. He showed up at the district office the next day, banging on the locked glass door, his face red. "I built that school," he shouted, spit flecking the pane, but the security guard waved him off, bored. He called the board chair, leaving voicemails that swung from threats to pleas. "You're ruining me. Give me a hearing." They went unanswered. The local paper ran a front-page story, principal ousted in fraud scandal, with a grainy photo of him scowling, his cracks laid bare. His cousin lawyered up, but the shell company's books were a house of cards, folding under scrutiny. Sarah didn't gloat, didn't need to. She stood firm, not vengeful, just fair. Her first act was an email to staff. "Art's back. Supplies are ordered. Let me know what the kids need." No fanfare, just results. Teachers replied fast, paper, glue, a working copier, and she made it happen, rerouting funds Rick had hoarded. The board's audit kicked off, a slow grind through years of his schemes, but Sarah didn't wait. She walked the halls, her sneakers soft on the floor, checking classrooms, nodding at kids. Jamal ran up, waving a spelling test, 90% his best yet. "Miss Sarah, look." She ruffled his hair, her chest easing a fraction. Rick's flailing grew desperate. He crashed a PTA meeting, uninvited, barging into the gym where parents sat on bleachers, sipping lukewarm punch. "You're all sheep," he yelled, arms flailing, his shirt untucked. "She's a nobody. Stole my job." Mrs. Grayson stood, her diner apron still on, voice cutting through. "You stole from our kids." She gave him back. The room erupted, claps, shouts, a thermos chucked near his feet. He stumbled out, pale, hands trembling, the crowd's roar chasing him into the snow. Sarah's kindness echoed, louder now. Kids trickled back to her orbit, Maria with a shy, "Thank you." Tasha clutching a new book. Eddie found her in the hall, his stutter soft. Miss Sarah, you're the B-boss now." She knelt, meeting his eyes. "Just helping out, kiddo." He hugged her, quick and fierce, and she felt it, the weight lifting, not just hers, but theirs. Parents noticed too. Luis, the mechanic, dropped off a box of markers at the office, muttering, "Heard you're fixing things." She didn't know he'd seen her tutor his niece at the center months back. Free, no fuss. The balance tipped. The board confirmed her role, interim, with a vote for permanent in spring. They restored the art program, hired back an aide Rick had cut. Sarah found a check in the mail, back pay from a grant Rick had misfiled, enough to cover rent on a tiny studio. She moved in, her box of stuff unpacked in a night, Eddie's drawing on the fridge. It wasn't much, but it was hers, earned. Rick's cracks widened. His cousin flipped, cutting a deal with the auditor, dates, amounts, Rick's signature on every dirty transfer. The district attorney called. Charges loomed. Embezzlement, fraud. He sat in his apartment, whiskey bottle empty, staring at the wall. His plaques, his swagger, his throne, all dust. He'd schemed and yelled, thinking he was untouchable, but Sarah's quiet truth had gutted him. He muttered to the dark, should have fired her sooner, but it was weak, a lie even he didn't believe. Sarah didn't parade her win. She ended her first month with a staff meeting, no yelling, just coffee and a plan. "We're a team," she said, voice steady. "Tell me what works." Teachers spoke up, ideas, not fear, and she listened, jotting notes. After, she walked the empty halls, the hum of a working heater in the air, the kids' artwork back on the walls. She stopped at her old classroom, the rug still frayed, and exhaled a long, slow breath, the weight gone. Outside, the snow slowed, the city settling into a brittle calm. Sarah locked the school, her key new and shiny, her shadow long in the streetlight. Rick's reign was a memory, his schemes ash. She brought balance, not with noise, but with the quiet justice of someone who'd never stopped caring. The kids had their crayons, their chance, and she had her place, not loud, not proud, just right. February swept into Cleveland with a bitter wind, frosting the windows of Jefferson Elementary, but inside, the halls glowed warmer than they had in years. Sarah Brooks stood in the classroom she'd once scrubbed as an aide, now her office as interim principal. 34, her blonde hair pulled back, with a clip she'd found in a drawer. She wore a thrift store sweater, green, a little frayed, over jeans. The desk was cluttered with budget drafts and a chipped mug of tea. Steam curling up in the morning quiet. Eddie's turkey drawing hung above it, taped crooked but steady, a crayon anchor in the storm she'd weathered. The school was healing. Art bins brimmed with markers and glue sticks, the copier whirred without jamming, and teachers lingered in the lounge, laughing over coffee instead of whispering about cuts. Sarah had spent weeks untangling Rick's mess, rerouting funds, ordering supplies, listening to staff. She didn't strut or preach. She just worked, her sneakers soft on the linoleum, her voice low but sure when she asked, "What do the kids need?" The answer came in waves, books, desks, a heater that didn't clank, and she made it happen one checkmark at a time. She didn't expect the recognition. It started small, creeping up like dawn through fog. One Monday, Ms. Torres dropped a note on her desk. "You saved us. Thank you." Simple, scrawled on a post-it, but it hit Sarah like a punch. She tucked it into her bag, her throat tight. Then Jamal ran up at recess, his coat unzipped, waving a spelling test, 100% his first. "Miss Sarah, you said I could," he grinned, and she ruffled his hair, her chest loosening. She didn't connect it, not yet, to the granola bars she'd slipped him, the extra minutes she'd spent on cat and dog. The real moment came mid-month, a Friday after school. Sarah was in the gym, stacking chairs from a parent-teacher night, her arms aching but her mind calm. The room smelled of floor wax and stale cookies, the bleachers empty save for a few stragglers. She didn't hear Mrs. Grayson approach, Eddie's mom, her diner apron swapped for a worn jacket, her face lined but soft. "Sarah," she said, voice rough from years of shouting orders over a grill. Sarah turned, brushing hair from her eyes. "Hey, good to see you." Mrs. Grayson held out a small envelope, her hands trembling slightly. "I saw what you did," she said, eyes locking on Sarah's. "For Eddie. For all of them." Sarah frowned. Taking it, inside was a thank you card, kid-scrawled letters spelling, "Miss Sarah," with a stick-figure teacher holding a pencil. "He told me," Mrs. Grayson went on, her voice cracking, "how you stayed late, taught him words when he couldn't talk right, gave him food when I couldn't. I didn't know, nobody did, till he showed me that drawing." Sarah's breath caught, her fingers tracing the card's edges. "I didn't," she started, but Mrs. Grayson cut her off, stepping closer. "You didn't have to, but you did. Every day, quiet like, thinking no one saw. Her eyes welled up, and she swiped at them, embarrassed. He reads now, Sarah. Books, not just words. Because of you. She pulled Sarah into a hug, quick and fierce, her voice a whisper. Thank you. Sarah stood there, the card in her hand, the gym blurring around her. Her chest tightened, not with pride, but something deeper. Relief, a held breath, finally let go. She hadn't done it for this, never wanted the spotlight, but it landed anyway, raw and real. She hugged back, her voice thick. He's a good kid, just needed a chance. Word spread, slow but sure. Parents started nodding at her in the halls, a quiet, hey thanks here, a shy smile there. Luis, the mechanic, stopped by with a coffee, black, no sugar, muttering for my niece. She's drawing again. Sarah didn't know Tasha's mom had told the board clerk about her tutoring, or that Ms. Torres had spread the story of the crayons she'd bought with her own dime. It wasn't loud, no parades, no speeches, just people seeing her, piece by piece. The emotional peak hit at the next staff meeting. Sarah stood at the front, her notes simple, budget updates, a new reading program. She kept it short, her voice steady, but when she finished, Ms. Torres stood, her eyes shining. One thing, she said, glancing around, we owe this to Sarah. She didn't just fight Malone, she fought for us. For the kids. The room went still, then erupted, claps, a few whistles, teachers she'd barely spoken to nodding hard. Sarah froze, her mug trembling in her hand, heat creeping up her neck. I just did my job, she mumbled, but they wouldn't have it. Little Eddie shuffled up after, his curls bouncing, a new pencil tucked behind his ear. And Miss Sarah, he said, quieter now, his stutter fading. You're the best. He handed her a folded paper, a new drawing, her with a crown, standing by a school. She knelt, her eyes stinging, and hugged him. You're the best, kiddo, she whispered, her voice breaking just a little. Rick's shadow lingered, but it was fading. The audit wrapped, $50,000 siphoned over 3 years, all traced him. He faced charges now, holed up in his apartment, the whiskey bottle his only friend. The paper ran another story, ex-principal faces jail time, and his name soured in the neighborhood. Parents spat it like a curse, kids forgot it. Sarah didn't check the headlines, she didn't need to. He was noise, she was substance. That night, she walked home, the snow crunching under her sneakers, her new studio a half-mile away. The card from Eddie stayed in her bag, the drawing on her fridge when she got in. She lit a candle, same one from her darkest night, and stood by the window, the city sprawling dark and quiet. Her silhouette cut the glow, sharp and still, a woman who'd never asked for thanks, but got it anyway. Relief washed over her, not loud but deep, a held breath released, a weight she hadn't known she carried gone. She didn't cry. Sarah wasn't the type, but her lips curved, a small, real smile. Her kindness had shaped lives, not with banners but with pencils and time, and now they saw it. Eddie's reading, Jamal's grin, Maria's art, it was enough. More than enough. Outside, dawn crept up, a thin gold line over the rooftops, and she watched it rise, her shadow softening in the new light. March rolled into Cleveland with a thaw, the snow melting into muddy rivulets along the streets near Jefferson Elementary. Sarah Brooks stood in the school's front hall, her sneakers scuffing the freshly waxed floor, a clipboard in hand. 34, her blonde hair tied back with a new elastic, nothing fancy, just practical. She wore a faded denim jacket over a teacher's polo, the interim principal tag clipped to her pocket. The air smelled of wet boots and fresh paint. She'd pushed for a mural in the entryway, kids' handprints in bright colors climbing the wall. Eddie's was there, a small green smudge near the bottom, and she smiled every time she passed it. The school breathed easier now. Classrooms buzzed with chatter, not tension. Art bins stayed full, the heater hummed steady, and teachers swapped lesson ideas in the lounge without glancing at the clock. Sarah had settled into the role, not with swagger, but with a quiet sureness. She'd hired a new aide, a young woman named Clara, fresh out of college and nervous as hell. Sarah found her fumbling with a copier jam her first day, paper crumpled in her hands. "Take it slow," Sarah said, her voice calm, guiding Clara's fingers to the release latch. You'll get it. Clara nodded, her shoulders easing, and Sarah saw herself in that shy grit, someone worth betting on. She paid it forward, piece by piece. Mornings, she'd sit with Clara over coffee, black, no sugar, walking her through schedules, budgets, the little tricks to keep kids focused. It's not about being loud, she'd say, her mug warm in her hands. It's about being there. Clara started shadowing her, picking up the way Sarah knelt to tie a loose shoelace or slipped a kid an extra worksheet without a word. One afternoon, Clara stayed late, helping a third grader with fractions, unasked, unpaid, and Sarah caught it from the hall, her chest lifting. She didn't say anything, just nodded, a flicker of pride in her eyes. Her kindness rippled wider. The community center became her second haunt. She'd tutor their weekends, her patch bag stuffed with books she'd scavenged from library sales. Tasha, the third grader who'd cracked dog months back, showed up with a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web. I read it, she beamed and Sarah grinned, lighter now, her laugh a soft echo in the room. What's next? She asked, pulling out a worn Matilda. Tasha's mom watched from the door, her clerk badge glinting, and later told Sarah she wants to be like you. Sarah shrugged it off. Just reading, that's all, but the word stuck, a quiet glow she carried home. The kids thrived under it. Eddie's stutter faded more each week. He'd read aloud in class now, slow but clear, his curls bouncing as he grinned at Sarah from the front row. Jamal started a spelling club, his idea, scribbled on a note he'd slid under her office door. Maria painted a picture for the mural, a sun with her name, in loopy letters, and Sarah hung it herself, ladder wobbling under her weight. She didn't announce these wins, just watched them grow, her step surer, her shoulders less hunched. Rick Malone's legacy, meanwhile, crumbled to dust. The audit closed, $50,000 confirmed stolen, plus fines he couldn't pay. He faced trial in April, his apartment seized, his name a punchline at the diner where Mrs. Grayson slung hash browns. Heard he's selling his car, she'd say, flipping a pancake, a smirk tugging her lips. The paper ran a follow-up. Fraudster principal fades, school flourishes, and parents tore out, pinning it to fridges like a trophy. Rick sat in a cheap motel now, TV flickering, his whiskey bottle empty. He'd mutter to the walls, I built that place, but the lie rang hollow, his voice thin against the hum of traffic outside. Sarah's glow outshone him, not with noise, but with roots. She rebuilt what he'd broken, literally, one day, fixing a wobbly desk in the second-grade room with a screwdriver from her bag. Clara watched, then grabbed a wrench, tightening a chair beside her. Teamwork, Sarah said, her laugh easy now, and Clara echoed it, a sound that filled the space Rick's yells once owned. Parents noticed Luis dropped off a toolbox, muttering, for the next fix. She didn't know he'd told his crew about her. How she'd tutored his niece into confidence, how it spread. The ripple hit deeper. Eddie's mom started a reading group at the diner, inspired by Sarah's nights at the center. She showed me it's not hard, Mrs. Grayson said, handing out flyers to regulars. Tasha's mom pushed the board for a scholarship fund, small but real, naming it after Sarah without asking. She'd hate the fuss, she told Ms. Torres, grinning, but it's right. Sarah found out late, a letter slipped under her door, and stared at it, her tea cooling, a flush creeping up her neck. She didn't want the name, just the chance for the kids, but it landed anyway, a quiet crown she'd never wear. Growth showed in her now. She'd laugh more, soft, not loud, her hands less clenched, her stride less hurried. She'd sit in her office after hours, the school silent, sketching plans, a library corner, a summer program. The mug stayed chipped, the tea stayed cheap, but her eyes were brighter, her voice surer when she spoke to staff. We're doing this together, she'd say, and they believed her, not out of fear, but trust. One evening, she walked the halls alone, the mural glowing under the lights. She stopped at Eddie's handprint, her fingers brushing it, and thought of Rick, his plaques, his snarls, his empty throne. He'd faded, a ghost in a motel room, while her mark grew, pencils in kids' hands, books on their desks, a school that breathed again. Poetic justice didn't need a cheer. It lived in Jamal's spelling bee win, in Tasha's reading streak, in Eddie's steady th thanks, turning to thanks, Miss Sarah. She locked up, the key smooth in her hand, the night crisp outside. Her studio waited, a single bulb flickering, Eddie's drawing still on the fridge. She'd cook soup tonight, canned but warm, and sleep sounder than she had in months. Rick's name was Ash. Hers was a quiet flame, flickering in the kids she'd lifted, the lives she'd shaped. It wasn't loud, wasn't proud, just lasting like a handprint pressed into wet paint, drying into something real. April crept into Cleveland with a hesitant spring, the air warming just enough to melt the last snow into puddles along Jefferson Elementary's sidewalks. Sarah Brooks stood by the school's front doors, her denim jacket unbuttoned, blonde hair catching the breeze. 34, her hands tucked into her pockets, she watched kids spill out at dismissal, backpacks bouncing, voices loud with Friday freedom. The mural gleamed behind her, handprints vivid in the afternoon sun, and the halls echoed with chatter, not the tense hush of Rick's reign. Her clipboard was gone. She carried a small notebook now, scribbled with ideas, library books, a garden patch, her handwriting tight but hopeful. The wind had spread, slow at first, then fast. Teachers stood taller, their lessons bolder. Miss Torres started an art club, paint smudging her sleeves, grinning like a kid herself. The lounge buzzed with plans, not whispers. Someone brought a real coffee maker, the kind that didn't spit grounds, and Sarah chipped in for filters without a word. Classrooms brightened, new desks trickled in. Funded by a grant she'd chased down late at night, her tea cold by the laptop. Kids noticed. Jamal bragged about his spelling club to his mom. Maria's son painting hung in the hall. Eddie read Charlotte's web cover to cover, his stutter a faint echo now. The community caught it next. Parents lingered at pickup, not just to grab and go. Luis, the mechanic, organized a cleanup day, hauling rakes and trash bags, muttering, "School's ours now." Mrs. Grayson's reading group at the diner grew. Regulars, truckers, retirees, cracked open paperbacks over pancakes, her flyers pinned by the register, for the kids like Sarah did. The local paper ran a feature, from fired aide to principal, a quiet revolution, and Sarah cringed at the headline, but the photo showed her kneeling by Eddie, his grin wide, her smile shy. Copies popped up on fridges, bulletin boards, a quiet badge of pride. Rules shifted too. The board, spooked by Rick's fraud, greenlit Sarah's scholarship fund, $500 to start, enough for a few kids' supplies next year. Tasha's mom pushed it through her clerk voice firm. She earned it. Sarah didn't fight the name, Brooks Fund, though she blushed when they told her, muttering, "It's for them, not me." The district sent an inspector, a stern woman in a pantsuit, who nodded at the mural, the stock closets, and said, "This is what a school should be." Sarah stood by, hands clasped, her thank you soft but steady. Her kindness kept inspiring, a ripple turning to waves. Clara, the new aide, started a homework club, free after hours, mimicking Sarah's center days, her shy smile growing bolder. "You showed me how," she told Sarah over coffee, and Sarah shrugged, sipping hers black. Tasha's mom rallied parents for a book drive. Boxes piled up in the gym, dog-eared but loved, and Sarah sorted them late, her laugh lighter when a kid grabbed Matilda. Eddie's mom told the diner crew, "She never quit, not on my boy," and a grizzled trucker dropped $20 in the tip jar, grunting for her kids. Sarah saw it, but from afar. She'd walk the halls after hours, the school settling into dusk, her sneakers quiet on the tile. The mural glowed under the lights, the chatter lingered in the walls, brighter, freer. She'd stop by her office, the turkey drawing still taped up, and feel it, pride, not loud but deep, a warmth in her bones. She didn't need the spotlight. The kids' grins, the teachers' nods, the parents' thanks were enough. She'd won, not just against Rick, but for something bigger. A place that worked, that cared. Rick's fade was complete. Trial hit in late March. Guilty, 3 years probation, fines he'd never pay. He slunk out of court, silver hair dull, his motel room swapped for a cousin's couch. The paper barely covered it, ex-principal sentenced, forgotten, and his name vanished from the neighborhood's lips. Jefferson didn't need him. Sarah's shadow had erased his, her quiet good outlasting his loud rot. The world kept turning and Sarah faced a choice. The board called mid-April, their vote nearing, make her permanent or post the job wide. "You've done wonders," the chair said, his voice gruff but kind. Stay, or go bigger, district's watching. She sat in her studio that night, soup simmering, the scholarship letter on the table. Stay. Keep building here, her kids, her school, or go. Push the fight wider, more schools, more chances? She traced Eddie's drawing with a finger, her tea cooling, and didn't answer, not yet. She walked back to Jefferson the next day, the sun higher, the air softer. Kids waved from the playground, Clara hauling a box of books beside her, Miss Torres sketching mural plans on a napkin. The school stood taller, not in height but in spirit, its halls louder with life, its cracks patched by her hands. She saw it from the steps, her breath slow, her pride a quiet hum. Her kindness had sparked this. Pencils, time, belief, and others carried it now, a fire she'd lit without meaning to. The choice hung open, full. Stay, root deeper, watch Eddie read his next book, Jamal Ace's next test, or chase more. Spread it beyond these walls, fight for kids she'd never meet? She didn't know, didn't need to, not tonight. She locked the doors, her key familiar now, the notebook in her pocket heavy with dreams. The city stretched out, spring whispering through it, and she stepped into it, her silhouette fading into the dusk, leaving the question unanswered but alive. May bloomed over Cleveland, the air thick with lilac, and the hum of lawnmowers, a soft evening light spilling through the cracked blinds of Sarah Brooks' studio apartment. She sat on a sagging couch, one leg tucked under, her blonde hair loose and tangled after a long day. 34, her hands rested on a chipped mug, tea, lukewarm now, her denim jacket slung over a chair, the interim principal tag still clipped to it. The room was small, bare, a thrift store table, a single bulb flickering overhead, a box of books in the corner. Eddie's turkey drawing stayed on the fridge, its crayon lines faded but fierce, holding court over a space she carved out from nothing. Jefferson Elementary had settled into a rhythm, her rhythm. The board had voted that week, permanent principal, unanimous, the chair's gruff, "You're our pick," still ringing in her ears. She'd nodded her "thank you," quiet, and walked away with a contract in her bag, her sneakers steady on the pavement. The school thrived, mural bright, classrooms full, kids spilling out with stories of spelling bees and art shows. Clara ran her homework club like a pro. Miss Torres painted with the kids on weekends, and the Brooks Fund grew, $1,000 now, enough for a few more backpacks next fall. Sarah didn't flaunt it. She just worked, her notebook full of plans, her laugh softer but surer. Tonight, though, she was alone. The radio crackled low, some old Springsteen tune, Thunder Road, and she leaned back, the mug warm against her palms. Her eyes traced the ceiling, its water stains like maps of the past year. Rick's yell, the snow-soaked walk home, the candlelit nights when she'd lost it all. Scars lingered, not loud, not proud, but there. Her hands, rough from scrubbing desks and sorting books, told the story. Her bank account, still thin, whispered it. She'd fought, not with fists but with pencils and patience, and won a school, a chance, a life. The door creaked open. Clara, her dark hair in a messy bun, holding a folded note. "Found this in the office," she said, her voice shy but warm. Kid dropped it off. Sarah took it, her brow furrowing, and Clara slipped out, leaving the quiet behind. The paper was worn, folded tight, a second grader's scrawl on the outside. "Miss Sarah." She opened it slow, her breath catching. "A thank you, 2 years old, from Eddie. Thanks for the pencil." It read, the letters shaky, a stick figure her with a smile. A post-it stuck to it, Mrs. Grayson's handwriting. He wrote this back then. Found it in his bag. Thought you should have it. Sarah's chest tightened, her fingers trembling on the page. She hadn't known, not then. Not when she'd slipped him that pencil in the chaos of Rick's reign, expecting nothing. She saw him now, clear as day, 7 curls wild, his stutter thick, clutching that pencil like gold. She'd given it without a thought, one of a dozen quiet acts, granola bars, crayons, late nights, never dreaming they'd stick. But they had. Eddie read novels now, his voice steady. Jamal spelled victory at the county bee. Maria's art hung in the library. Her kindness, unseen then, had rooted deep, blooming into this. She stood, slow, and crossed to the fridge, pinning the note beside the turkey drawing. Her reflection flickered in the window, Older, sharper, but soft at the edges. She smiled, small and real, her scars and wins blending in the half-light. The radio shifted, glory days, ironic and fitting, and she hummed along, her voice a whisper, cracked but alive. She'd lost a job, a home, a piece of herself, but gained more, a school that breathed, kids who thrived, a legacy she hadn't chased but caught. Outside, the neighborhood settled, kids biking past, a dog barking, the city humming low. She stepped to the window, mug in hand, and looked out. Jefferson loomed a few blocks away, its brick silhouette dark against the dusk, the mural a faint glow under streetlights. She saw it all, the halls she'd walked, the desks she'd fixed, the faces she'd fought for. Rick was a ghost, his yells silenced, his name dust. She was here, solid, her shadow stretching long. The tea went cold, the mug heavy. She set it down, her hands free, and pulled the note close again. Eddie's thanks blurred in her vision. Not tears, not quite, just a sting she let sit. She'd done it for them, not for this, but the thanks landed anyway, a weight and a lift at once. Her lips moved, soft. You're welcome, kiddo. It was for Eddie, for Jamal, for Maria, for every small soul she'd held up when no one else would. The choice from April lingered, stay, grow here, or chase more, but it didn't press tonight. She'd stay, she knew it in her bones. Jefferson was hers, not a stepping stone but a root. The district could wait, these kids couldn't. She'd build, more books, a garden, a chance for every shy grin. And let the rest come when it did. Her laugh, when it came, was quiet, a breath against the glass, fogging it briefly. The radio faded, static taking over, and she clicked it off, the silence thick, but kind. She stood there, alone with a kid's note, a drawing, a life she'd stitched back together. Her silhouette sharpened in the window, the city beyond it vast and still. She didn't need more, not tonight. She'd fought, she'd won, and they'd seen her. Not the loud her, not the proud her, but the her who'd cared too much to quit. One last look at the note. Then she turned, the candle from her darkest night, unlit, on the table. She didn't need it now. The light was hers, earned steady. She crossed to the couch, sat, and let the quiet hold her. The final line slipped out, a whisper to no one, hanging in the air like smoke. Sometimes you don't see the good you do, until it looks back at you.